So welcome everyone, Happy New Year. It's nice to see folks come through for our community check-in. First, captions are available by clicking on the CC button. And Timothea, just let me know if that's all set actually.
The closed captioning?
The closed captioning, yep.
Yeah, I think that should be set. I don't see that feature right now on my screen personally, but I'm not sure if anyone else can see it.
Okay, I'm also not seeing it. And apologies for this. Let's see. And Laura is saying that she doesn't see the CC. So let me just see. Okay, so we will look into this, and yeah, we're very sorry the closed captioning is not showing up for folks. So we will look into that and make sure that captions are made available during the later part of this presentation or afterwards in the recording. But thank you everyone for joining us on our check-in, and today we're talking about the power of storytelling. I'm Mina Kim, my pronouns are she, her. I'm the program officer of the community initiative, and I'm calling in from Medford on the unceded lands of the Massachusetts, Pawtucket, and neighboring Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples. We want to acknowledge that everything we do and nourishes us happens on Native and Indigenous lands. We're going to go over some guidelines for engagement. And so while we're looking into the captions, please bear with us. In order to use the Q&A function, there's a Q&A icon where you can type in your questions. You can also put in questions in the chat where they'll be moderated by the facilitator, by me and the community team members that we have here, Lisa Simmons and Timothea Pham. Also, we want folks, if they are speaking into the space, to speak your truth and use I statements. There are no universal truths, and your story is your story. Also, we ask folks to be present in listening and to also practice mindful listening and acknowledge each speaker as holding their own set of experiences and knowledge. And then there's the acronym WAIT, why am I talking? And WASTE, why am I still talking? Just to make sure that we leave enough space for folks to share. In terms of our communities team, we have Lisa Simmons, who's the manager of our program, along with two other program officers, Timothea Pham and Ricardo Guillaume. These are regions, and so you can see each of us has 2 to 3 different regions. The places in pink are cultural districts. And the Mass Cultural Council comprises 7 programs. And so there are programs related to organizations and cultural facilities and artists, as well as our Universal Participation Program and Creative Youth Development. In terms of some upcoming opportunities, we have our festivals grants for spring and summer festivals. The deadline for that is March 1st. We also just opened up the Asian American Pacific Islander Arts and Culture COVID-19 Recovery Program. The deadline for that is March 23rd. And then Mass Humanities has their Expand Massachusetts Stories grant program that supports projects that collect, interpret, or share narratives about the Commonwealth with an emphasis on the voices and experiences that have gone unrecognized or have been excluded from public conversation. And the deadline to submit letters of inquiry for that program is April 11th. And so today we have our wonderful guest speakers, and we want to thank them again for joining us. And we're going to talk about storytelling, which is a powerful art form for us to better understand ourselves and each other, and can help illuminate common bonds as well as differences that draw on our individual experiences and situations. And storytelling can also bring more complexity and also counter dominant narratives that may flatten or exclude certain people, their experiences and identities. And we are going to hear from artists and creatives who are using storytelling in multiple mediums through various approaches. And so we're looking for that conversation to take place today. we're going to start off with some arts advocacy updates from Vi Quach from MASSCreative. And then we have Edwin Cabrera, Rajaiah Jones, and Alison Miller, who are Lynn Artist Filmmakers. Edwin is also the chairperson for the Lynn HipHop Wall of Fame. We have Erika Slocumb of Reliquary of Blackness and the Black Holyoke Oral History Project. And then Cara Solomon and Armand Coleman of Everyday Boston. So, Tree, we'll start off with you.
Thank you, Mina. I don't have a lot to share. The decision makers are on a little low, but a couple of top things to remind folks is pay attention to how your specific area is using ARPA money and ensure that you share your belief that the arts should be supported with those funds. Because they're not strictly written out to say, this is how you use this and this. So having a voice in there to say, hey, we think some of it at least should be used for the arts in this community. The other big thing on the horizon is the executive branch released their budget for the coming year and proposed 20 million for arts for the state, which is higher than the typical 16 million they usually start with. So that's kind of good news and kind of really shows that this sustained advocacy push that we've been doing over the past few years is showing evidence and impact. So we are gonna wait through the whole process for the House version and then for the state version, for the Senate version. And then as usual, we will continue to push for as much as possible for the arts because we believe it's worth it. I'm going to use that to lead into a plug. MASSCreative is part of advocacy coalition called Create the Vote, where we are trying to bring all the arts leaders and communities together to have a legislative, I don't know what the official term, like a voting power type of pull so that we can influence more policy that impacts our communities. We are centering the voices of folks who have been marginalized in the past because those tables have been very exclusive in the past, and we not only want to acknowledge it, but try to create new tables. And so that participation by folks is something we value and need. I will have more information on ways to engage. We're probably hoping for the first meeting to happen sometime later this month, early next month, with folks who have already participated with Create the Vote in the past, and then engage new arts leaders in a transition towards full collaboration across the state. I think that is most of it for me. Thank you, folks. And I'm gonna log off camera and listen to these great people talk about storytelling.
Thanks so much, Tree. And as you'll see in the chat, we have links that Timothea is providing, and I also want everyone to know that the closed captions are available now. Apologies, they weren't available from the beginning. And I see one question in here from Sandy Dennis. Can you add us, Sandra Dennis, excuse me, can you add us to Create the Vote? And I believe, Sandra, that you can add yourself to the mailing list, if that is your question. And Tree, if you're still on there, let us know if folks can just add themselves to the campaign. Thank you. All right, so we're going to get into it. We have a great program today, and I'd like to next welcome Edwin, Rajaiah, and Ali to share some of the stuff that they're doing in Lynn.
Cool, awesome. I'm going to introduce myself really quick, and I'll pass to Ali and Rajaiah, and I'll also be sharing our screen. We'll be talking about a documentary we've all been working on. And then later on, I'll also be talking about the Lynn Hip Hop Wall of Fame, which is a project I'm working on in Lynn, trying to gather up the community of local artists, musicians, and rappers. I'm Edwin. I am a co-founder of Grindhouse Recordings, which is a media company founded in Lynn. Originally, it was started with me and my best friend to help promote the Lynn hip hop culture. And we did that through being a record label and providing that services for artists, but also we started a podcast called the Grindhouse Podcast. We would interview local artists in the area. And that sort of is a large reason why we eventually went on and did put together the project, the Lynn Hip Hop Wall of Fame, which I'm now the chairperson of, and I'll get back to that a little bit later. I'll pass it on to Ali.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Ali. I am a Lynn artist, public artist, a filmmaker and art therapist, and housing advocate, which really fueled me getting into this particular film. Rajaiah.
Good afternoon. I'm Rajaiah. I'm a local Lynn filmmaker, kind of a recent college graduate, so finding my footing, but always been a filmmaker at heart. So glad to be here with you all.
All right, I'm going to share my screen, Ali. Let me know when you want me to hit the next on the page there.
Great. Thanks. So the three of us are working on this film together. It is highly collaborative. I'm the director, I guess, but it's really the three of us working very much in sync. So we're going to cover quite a bit of information. We just want to get through it. So I invite everyone to grab a pen. If you have questions, if you could write them down. Really, really would love this to be a conversation. Okay, so the Lynn artist response to gentrification and art washing. You can click the next. So we're creating a film and we really want it to be telling stories, absolutely. Hopefully education in some ways. We really want to pose these questions and I'm just going to read them. So what is the power of art? Why are artist communities in Lynn so important to preserve? We're really going to explore different artist communities in Lynn and how they overlap and support each other. How do artists in their communities benefit from public art? How do they suffer from it, if they do? How do we as Lynn artists see it being used to gentrify? Is art being used as an eraser? How has public art been used for gentrification in other communities in the past? Is this new? Is there a better, more ethical way to put or make art in public settings where the art is made for and by that community? How can that be funded? Because a lot of what we're seeing right now is it is funded publicly, but like a lot of the walls are private. And that's always an argument. It's like, well, that was someone owned that building. So yeah. How are those responsible for using art to gentrify being held accountable, especially for those who are profiting directly off the gentrification itself? And finally, and most importantly for the film, what has the response from Lynn artists been? And what would we like it to be as art washing continues to play a key role in gentrifying our downtown area? Great. Next slide, please. Great. Okay, so I just want to mention that documentaries are meant to be objective, right? Where it's almost like a little bit of journalism. The three of us are deeply embedded into this community. We've all grown up here. And so our perspective is of that bias and like in seeing, you know, our community's struggle. Other people are not going to see gentrification in the same light. And so I just like to put that out there because my voice and my words, like these are like this is from like my perspective. And I just think that's important. I try not to edit that because I feel like it's important to just be real about what's going on. So I took this photo earlier this summer. And I'll just read it. It says, when beautiful murals start to go up around Lynn during a large-scale mural festival a few years ago, I was excited. I even volunteered for the first couple weeks, but I dove in without asking the right questions. I didn't know what I was actually supporting. The murals featured here in this photo are now either knocked down or will be covered by buildings for luxury unit apartments. The developer responsible for the buildings going up has been funding this particular festival all along. And so I pose the question, who do we hold accountable when public art is used as a mask for gentrification? This perfect Trojan horse. And it's heavy. I just want to add that too. Okay. Another mural put up, another luxury unit being built. So here we see yet another mural, and behind it, another project, same developer, which is interesting. But that's not important. It's more about like what that building is going to be, and it's completely out of range for the average Lynn person. So I said the irony of seeing Black and brown faces being used to displace a community of predominantly Black and brown people is evident to the three of us, and it has fueled the film that we're working on. And so a question I pose is, are using flown in, meaning not local artists, are using flown in BIPOC artists and images of BIPOC bodies honoring Lynn's diverse community, or is it pandering to folks in order to disguise its longer term impact of gentrification and displacement? Can it be both? Does one outweigh the other? Positives, negatives are all there that we want to explore in this film. Next slide. Okay. Sorry for all the words. It helps me not ramble. So we're going to show you a clip in a moment featuring this Lynn artist, Michael Agahawa. So a lifelong Lynn artist, Michael Agahawa is one of the featured creatives in the film. In an interview that we gave, he states that he was aware he was contributing to the problem of artists gentrifying spaces. So he decided to use his wall that he received from Beyond Walls to talk about the issue that they were not openly addressing themselves. Michael's mural depicts youth he worked with at an after-school program here in Lynn, holding up their homes as trophies. Michael stating that, quote, kids should be proud to be from here, from Lynn, proud of their home. They should be able to afford to stay as they grow up here. Oops, and I didn't complete a sentence there. It's a youth from that program also helped paint him, paint in the mural. And Michael has this beautiful magic to him of just people are drawn to him, and he's just so willing to pass that brush over and get people like participating in it. And I think Michael takes that responsibility of being a public artist really seriously, that like it's my space because I grew up here, I live here, but also like it's everyone's space. And so it should be a more welcoming environment, and participatory is awesome. So during he tried to get a wall from Beyond Walls the first year, they denied him. And then the second year they denied him again, but he like helped apprentice. And then the third year he submitted, he was accepted. And he did this gorgeous mural and had an opening. So Michael invited the community to his opening, including a housing advocacy organization in Lynn. Michael asked the crowd to please sign a petition to create more affordable housing in Lynn. It was curious to me, yet not surprising to all of us, when just about everyone was willing to sign except for the founder of Beyond Walls. And we are just going to cut to Michael's clip here.
Before the murals were even put up, and they were like scouting, just like weird things being said about Lynn, like making it more walkable and beautifying, and saying that certain parts of Lynn were dangerous when in fact they weren't. So to know that someone from outside of Lynn was saying these things was kind of hurtful. And then it started getting me thinking about like the motive behind the murals, and like it's bizarre for sure. It always seems like it's harder to get things going in your own area. You have this portfolio and this these people that stand behind you, but you still can't figure out a way to get things going, and then someone from the outside seems to just get everything.
All right, and I want to, Rajaiah, I was going to pass it to you, but I know we have 2 minutes, and I really would love for Edwin to just be able to talk about hip hop. But when people are asking questions, Rajaiah, I'd love for you to be able to get some of those. Great.
I'll quickly talk about the Lynn Hip Hop Wall of Fame, which is kind of in a way connected to this project. A lot of Lynn has a huge hip hop culture in this community. And as part of Grindhouse Recordings, our podcast that we've been doing, we've been interviewing a lot of the Lynn hip hop artists and getting a sense of that community and culture. So through those conversations, I wanted to try to get the community themselves more involved and take ownership of the artists within that community. And so that's where the idea for the Lynn Hip Hop Wall of Fame came about. And Michael is actually the muralist for this project as well. And the way kind of this project is operated is we have kind of a two-phase voting system to try to get the community to vote for the artists. The first is by recruiting curators, pretty much anybody within the Lynn hip hop scene to apply to be a curator. And if you click this link here, there's information about the project and information to get involved. And then the second phase of it, so once the curators vote and give us their recommendations, it helps kind of uncover who in Lynn is a part of the scene, what their contribution is, help kind of uncover a lot of stories. And then once it comes to the actual voting for the public, people in Lynn that aren't curators, this kind of helps sort of dwindle down the pool so that the general public can then vote. On this website itself, we have a blog section, a wall section, so that people can get to know the culture a little bit more. And so over here, we'll have posts geared towards artists, getting them to know a little bit about the music industry. We also have events that we've done before. So if you scroll down, there's performances from our past. These are all Lynn hip hop artists who have thrown shows before. I'll play you a few clips of the performances here. This, for example, is Now You See Low, Lynn hip hop artist. Oh, it's not playing. Let's see. Oh, let's see. Let's go with this.
Money like sin away, slipping through a handful. Spend it like it's water just to end up with another damn fool. Got no choice to watch me like I'm the only channel. Risk taker, but the chances on making it were too good for this to ever be a gamble.
Let's see.
And unfortunately, we are close to time.
Yep. Awesome. Well, it's just, if you want any more information, go to lynnhiphop.com. All the information is there about the project, ways people can get involved, ways you can donate. You can watch a lot of these videos online as well. So any more information, go to lynnhiphop.com to find out more about it. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. And Rajya, I do want to give you space as well. Is there anything that you would like to add to this particular portion of the conversation?
I think it might take a little more time, so definitely at the end with questions, but I've just been lucky enough to work with Edwin and Ali on this film. It's just been the three of us getting all the footage, just out here, just, yeah. It's been cool. It's been an experience.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And we do hope to get into more of a conversation at the end of the program after all of our guests have time to speak. And I also want to let folks know that we'll be sharing all the links that folks are mentioning here. And at the end of the program, we'll be sharing out notes as well. And Martha, yes. I don't believe people can save the chat, but we'll save the chat and we'll share notes and a link to the recording once it's available. All right, so next we have Erika Slocumb.
Sorry, I always forget that I'm muted. I'm gonna share my screen, see how this works. Yeah, okay. So I'm Erika Slocumb. I'm going to talk a little bit about recording Black history in my project Reliquary of Blackness in Holyoke. So, like I said, just talk a little bit about the program. Who am I? I'm a mother, I'm a partner, I'm an artist, an activist, a scholar, and an educator. This is an old picture of my two boys and my partner. So oral history. So I'll just read a couple of quotes. Oral history collects memories and personal commentaries of historical significance through recorded interviews. Oral history tells us about events, tells us less about events and their meaning. Oral sources tell us not just what happened, not just what people did, but what they wanted to do, what they believed they were doing, and what they now think they did. So the purpose of the Black Holyoke Project was really to collect and preserve the history of Black folks in Holyoke. And that was, so I'm starting in the 18th century into the present, really using the archive as well as oral histories and community engagement. So this is a picture to people that I really love. So in the project, one of the things, like the basis of oral history and oral history interviews is really about the connection to community, right? And those interpersonal connections. So it's different than just going into a community and asking like, random questions or even specific questions, and more about making those personal connections. So in the picture on the left, that's Miss Jackie Westbrook, and we're sitting on her front porch. And I always say that if the archivist at the museum saw this picture, it would drive her crazy, because these are like archival documents, right? Her house is like a museum to her family. And their history going back in Holyoke goes back to like the early 19-teens. And she has that history in her home. Right now we have parts of it at Wisteriahurst. And so really like the importance is like, how do we bring this history? Like part of our generationally, like Black folks, like oral tradition is part of, who we are and how we share our stories and our history. And so it's like, how do we bring that from like a personal level into the community when so much of the history has to do with, like the larger general history, right? On the right is Doug Griffin, and we're looking through, his family albums. And there's like a 2 or 3 hour long conversation with us where we're just like looking at the photo albums, and he's like telling me stories about the pictures, telling me stories about the people. At one point, we're actually going through and we're looking at like church documents that he had. And really having the opportunity, how do I move this? Really having the opportunity to have a conversation about what it looks like for him to be like, I always say that he's the Holyoke historian. So back to Miss Westbrook, this is her on the left here is a plaque that she has in her garden, and it's something that her mother made. And on the right is a dress that belonged to her grandmother and had been passed down and worn by many of the women in their family. So a part of doing like the oral history again is that community interaction. And so every Thursday, I was at the soup kitchen. This woman here on the left is, oh man, why am I drawing a blank on her name? Anisha Darkwa Davis. And so she was born and raised in Holyoke, and she went on the project. She helped me from the beginning from the archival dig all the way up to setting up the actual archive that we created and the exhibit that we held. And so the cool thing about Holyoke history is like the connections to like US history, and not just US Black history, but US history in general. JJ Jennings played for the World Football League. He was like top football player at Holyoke High School. And even back to Miss Westbrook, like there are a number of Westbrooks who play professional sports, and their beginnings start in Holyoke, right? Like their family beginnings start in Holyoke. And the really interesting thing is like a story that she always tells about how her father, like his first job when he came to, his first job in Holyoke or in the area is working at Spalding. And so she always tells a story about like the connections to like sports and general sports across the country. Just some more photos of folks, other folks from the community. So again, like the project is really focusing on collecting the stories, collecting artifacts, and then that the exhibit that we held. The exhibit was made into smaller parts so that folks from the community, like actually right now, we just had someone is coming in a couple of days to the museum to pick up the smaller panels so that they can display it. And I can't even remember where it's going, but so that they can display it in their space in Holyoke. And this is just Anisha. The dope thing about Wisteriahurst is that it's a very white space. And so not the dope thing about Wisteriahurst, but the dope thing about the exhibit is that Wisteriahurst is a very white space. And a lot of the folks, when they tell the story of like their experience in the community, is that like this wasn't a place for them, right? Like it's a house museum, I want to say dedicated to the Skinner family, but really it's supposed to be like an open museum to tell the history of Holyoke. And so we just made it a really Black ass space for a couple of months. We took over the gallery, the library, and part of the foyer into the museum, and just really made so the exhibit was like walking into someone's scrapbook, right? Or their family photo album. And so it's set up in such a way that it's only pictures from folks from the community and their words on the walls. So there's very, very little from me except for just introducing the project and kind of telling like what I think from my experience, what the main kind of like points are that came up for folks. I was gonna tell y'all a quick story, and I know like time is limited, but I'm gonna tell y'all. On the right, these two women at the time were 90 years old. They were telling me stories about them growing up when they were young girls in Holyoke. Both had moved to Springfield at another point. But when I brought them to the exhibit, so they hadn't been able to find a ride. So I was like, I'm gonna borrow a car, I'm gonna come pick y'all up, we're going to the exhibit. And they were able to meet like family, see people that they hadn't seen in years, again, who were family, and really just have the opportunity to connect. And the thing about it that was so beautiful is that Miss Dudley passed away a few months after we did the oral history interviews and the exhibit. And on the way home, like it was such a beautiful thing because they were like the girls in the back seat, just like, oh man, did you see this? Did you see them? Just laughing and telling stories and just reminiscing. And it was so dope because it was like, it's something that one of the things that a lot of folks brought up when they were, speaking to me and giving their interview and giving, their history and their experience about growing up and living in Holyoke was that there were so many stories that they completely forgot about, like folks being at Miss Trudy here on the left. She told a story about how she was at the March on Washington when Dr. King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. And, as she's looking through her photos, it's kind of bringing that up. And she's just like, the thing is that there's so much of what they experience is history, right? And is a broader part of like I said, US history, that they just forget that like, it's important to me, but it's also important to a larger community, right? Part of this is that like, because I did this work with the community, because we did this work, one of the things that came up a lot is like folks are consistently like, hey, Erika, can you come and talk? And I mean like on radio stations and all of this. On this day, this is Amakan Sudan on the left and Doug Griffin again on the right. And one of the things that I usually do when we have these like things where folks are like, can you come and tell this history, is usually I bring the folks with me, right? Because the reality of the situation is like, yes, I'm doing this work, but without the community, like it's not possible, right? We opened up the museum on a day that the museum was closed so that Miss Trudy, for her birthday, could bring her family so that they could all come and kind of just be in the space. The opening event was just folks. Like, so the first day that the exhibit opened, we only had folks and their family come, like the Black folks from the community and their family come. We didn't have press. I wanted the folks to be able to see it first, experience the space, and just be in it, right? Because again, a lot of this history hadn't been told and hadn't been publicized in such a way. This is Miss Duncan, baby Duncan, holding my son Kepri. So I was pregnant during the whole year, well, most of the year while we were doing the thing. And like folks just kept being like, you know, the baby, our baby. So it's like really cool because we had that kind of like connection. On the left here is just a note that someone left, just being able to walk into the space and see, you know, their family on the wall. These women on the right had the opportunity to meet some of their family members that hadn't met before through the project. And again, we just did different things. So like writing, we had folks write their stories. We did vision boarding, we did zines, the oral histories, obviously. I made a comic book. So these are some pictures from that. These are the vision boards that folks made. We are funded by Mass Humanities. I was gonna talk about, Mina brought it up earlier, but the expanding stories grant that they have is really dope. It's up to $20,000. We did not get that much for this project, but we still got something. So that was great. And we were also funded from the local cultural council. So that was just like a cool thing. Here's my information. You know, how folks can get in touch. Still working on the project. So that's dope. And yeah.
Thanks so much, Erika. You're right on time. Yeah, and you know, from what Erika and Rajaiah, Ali, and Edwin have shared thus far, it's really wonderful to see how you have been amplifying, you know, the voices and experiences of people who have a relevant connection to that space and honoring them through the various mediums, through like filmmaking, as well as oral history telling and the curation of that exhibit as a way to honor their stories and the people. So thank you. And we're now going to go over to Armand, Coleman, and Cara Solomon from Everyday Boston. I almost said Everyday Stories.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Cara Solomon. Armand is elsewhere on the Zoom call. I just want to say I'm just blown away by the work of the panelists and feel really humbled to be even a part of this. So thank you for having me. I just want to start out with just a short 3-minute video about Everyday Boston, because I think sometimes a little hard to get your head around it. And so I think this will do the trick. And it features the voices of people that are critical to Everyday Boston. So here we go.
Stereotypes divide us. Stories connect us. When I'm able to connect with a complete stranger, I feel invigorated, empowered, optimistic, hopeful.
Strangers are just neighbors
that you don't know yet. Everyday Boston.
Everyday Boston is a nonprofit that connects neighbors across a divided city through the sharing of stories.
When the world is super divided and really isolated because of the pandemic, because of political issues, Everyday Boston's mission becomes a lot more important and a lot more relevant because it teaches people how to connect when it's the hardest to do so.
The story takes down the physical boundary and creates the connection.
As a reporter for several years, it felt important to be able to hand over a tool. We run workshops that strengthen the listening and communication skills of Bostonians of all ages through the activity of learning how to interview somebody else about their life. We do that in schools and in neighborhoods and in workplaces and in prisons.
When I'm interviewing somebody, I'm learning that person. I'm lifting somebody else up and others are invited to experience that. That's an awesome feeling to me.
The skill that I learned the most is how to listen well, how to empathize with people you've never met.
We provide people with the opportunity to use those skills through story collecting projects and story sharing events to connect with neighbors they might not otherwise know.
By storytelling, we get that empathy, we get that connection, we get that love. If I didn't hear Kathy's story, I would never knew Kathy. I love Kathy to death.
Judge is like a movie star to me, but he always picks up the phone for me. The only friggin' thing he doesn't like when I smoke a cigarette, but that's too bad.
For us to understand the importance of unity, don't have anything to do with color of your skin. The city needs this conversation.
This is where democracy began. We like to gather in small groups and tell stories. We had that once. It's time to get it back.
I had the opportunity to recently join up a curiosity and connection training through Everyday Boston. I had the privilege of getting to know Dana.
Sometimes you could hear something from a person that you never knew, and it changes your whole life.
After some really great advice that Dana gave me, I ended up writing it down and putting it on my desk, and I look at it every day.
Everyday Boston have done a great job on getting us together. Get somebody like George that just got out of prison. And so what? He still got 2 legs and breathes just like I do and cares about me more than many of them that never been to jail.
The first day I got out of prison, I was afforded the opportunity to actually engage in the Bridge Project and interview elders in my own community. So the Bridge Project teaches communication skills through workshops and programming. And once you come out, you have the opportunity to apply those skills on the outside. For me, it's very edifying.
One of the things I think Everyday Boston does so well is connect on a real grassroots level, individual to individual, story to story.
We really believe that stories are the gateway to human connection. Our vision is to make Boston the most connected city in America.
Okay, so thank you for watching that. Oh goodness, how do I do this? Slideshow. Okay, just very quickly, I'm going to unpack this because I want you to hear from Armand. So this is the founding team, as I think I said before, and I just want to take you very briefly through the journey here. So we started very much as a story collecting project with the founding team. I taught them how to interview and then supported them as they sort of interviewed folks in the neighborhood, and then we published the stories, and now we have a library full of dozens of stories and special projects that focus on things like medical distrust among BIPOC and the cradle to prison pipeline. From the story collecting project, we went to story share events because people were sort of not necessarily up for sitting down for an 1.5 hour long interview, but wanted to share stories regardless. And so we do that in libraries and community centers and out in the community itself through pop-up story shops. And then we sort of took a step back and realized that one of the reasons that stories are so critical is because people in Boston and people everywhere don't really talk to each other. And so we thought, can we sort of use this activity of interviewing somebody else about their life to help people strengthen their listening and communication skills, and then build in sort of a community building opportunity inside that workshop. So we do that now in a range of different settings, from schools to prisons. And the whole idea, again, is that when you share stories, you are strengthening all these skills and all these qualities and building belonging across the city. And then I will just say very briefly the how and the why of why this began. I was a reporter for several years and heard a lot of concerns from people across the board, but particularly people of color, about the way that the media was representing or not representing their communities, and the damage that that was doing in a very real way to the way that people outside the communities saw them, and the way that people inside their communities saw themselves. And so at a certain point, I just thought, like, this is enough with the parachuting into different neighborhoods and writing about people myself. It felt more important to give folks a tool that they could use, in other words, interviewing, to represent the city that they see, and put that out there. And then I will just say that the roots of Everyday Boston really go back decades with me. When I had a particularly rough patch when I was 19, I got cancer and I had to drop out of college, and it was a very isolating year. And the way that I kind of came back into the world at the end of that was by reaching out for the stories of people that I didn't know. And I became a reporter because of that, and had the skills and the opportunity every day to sort of learn how other people walk through life and meet people I would never have otherwise met. So I think listening to somebody else's story and sharing it is a precious and empowering responsibility that does not just belong with journalists. It belongs with all of us. And so that's hence Everyday Boston. Your turn, Armand.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm surprised. One thing Cara didn't say is like one of the first words that came out of her mouth about Everyday Boston when I first met her. She said the goal of Everyday Boston is to make Boston the most connected city in America. And I would actually say that my journey, today I serve as an advisor of Everyday Boston, also run my own nonprofit. However, my journey to being part of Everyday Boston actually began while I was incarcerated. So I did 28 years incarcerated for a crime I committed as a child. And Everyday Boston was like one of the first programs to come in and actually connect with men behind the wall. So just to make that, I started with her quote because I think the most disconnected from community are people that are exiled out of their communities into the prison spaces. And on my first day after 28 years incarcerated, the first organization to actually reach out to me and connect me to my community was Everyday Boston. They actually pulled me in, offered me the opportunity to interview with elders in my own community, which to me meant a great deal because coming home after that long amount of time, especially never spending a day as an adult in the real world, that was very, it was inviting just to say the least, right? And it was empowering. However, fast forward a little bit, I actually worked with Everyday Boston and I became coordinator of something called the Bridge Project. So to me, that was great because it gave the opportunity for men and women who were formerly incarcerated to actually be able to engage in their community in a way that could make them more connected to their community. And I would just say the power of interviewing people in your community is that it makes your community more human. It makes you less likely to actually destroy your own community. It was like disconnects and barriers are actually brought down. So yeah, just bringing it up to today. Like I said, I'm the director of my own program. However, I know it would be nothing without the mentorship of first of all Cara and the opportunities of leadership that the Bridge Project afforded me. Even when you can't come out, you can't even get a job. Literally, they put me in a position where I could get a position. I could build a resume. I was taken to the State House. I was talking to Northeastern School of Law, and I was able to actually bring others in the Bridge Project in those spaces with me, and it built connections that have withstood the test of time and that are fueling not only my reentry but just my success to this day. So I'm definitely very, very, very grateful for Everyday Boston, and I think it's a great project, especially the Bridge Project, even though I'm a little biased. But even still, like the power of stories is like my passion. First and foremost is restorative justice, and the power of your own story being heard by other people, be it my childhood trauma, whatever, also has a healing effect. And we have had the opportunity to literally combine the storytelling and the interviewing of Everyday Boston with the restorative justice principles, and we were able to do workshops. So that's just something that to me has been probably one of the most beautiful efforts that I've been able to encounter. So yeah, I have a lot more to say, but I'm gonna yield back to Cara and let her do her thing.
No, I got nothing more to say apart from the fact that, basically Armand has made a huge contribution to this organization. He's an integral part of it, and I'm tremendously grateful. But I do want to just say that the first project that we worked on together, right, Armand, was this Cradle to Prison Pipeline project that Northeastern was doing a research project on the Cradle to Prison Pipeline. Armand and I went to a conference. Armand raised his hand and said, like, where are the stories? And that gave birth to this project that we did. And Armand did restorative justice circles with returning citizens and law students. And then I did a training, and we did a story collecting project. And I can send you the link later. But that's the power. Now obviously he's doing his own tremendously powerful work with Transformational Prison Project, which I encourage you to check out.
Yeah, so, but I will say, Cara, I really, it's the work is still intertwined because I'm doing a project with Northeastern now around the constitutionality of giving juveniles like life. without parole, or being on parole for life. And it's the same concept, having qualitative or stories to accompany their quantitative stuff or their quantitative data. So it's something that others are approaching. We're doing the same thing with Harvard, where we're adding stories and qualitative data stories basically to data collection. So this is not something that was a one-off. It's something that others have seen. They've seen the success of it, and they kind of like incorporating it, and it's beautiful.
Thank you, Cara and Armand. And we've been putting links in the chat. And also at this moment, if folks have questions they want to ask our guest speakers, please start putting those in the chat as well. And yeah, I really appreciate, Cara and Armand, how you spoke about the everyday Boston work, and how, you talk about connection, but it's not just connection for connection's sake, but really to understand one another, to create those relationships, and to also kind of assess and reimagine what care looks like practiced by community members, which is really beautiful. And let me just check to see if there are any questions. So I don't see any in the chat yet, but one thing that I've been thinking about through this conversation is how stories really are so intimate, and they're very personal to ourselves as well as to the people who share them with us. And Ali, you mentioned at the beginning how documentaries are meant to be objective. And I've kind of been like thinking about, okay, like if they're meant to be objective, where does sort of neutrality come in? Is objective the same as neutrality? Because stories and people and places, there is no such thing as neutrality. And that's something that I've been mulling over. If anyone wants to respond to that.
I love that. Like, is objectivity neutrality? Because neutrality is a problem, in my opinion. And I think when I use the word objective because I have very strong gut feelings towards what I'm seeing. And I think I've been told I've been like blacklisted, or like that I'm talking about it too passionately, that I'm pushing people away. And so I really am, I'm like trying to do so much work to come at this with curiosity and like genuine curiosity. My feelings are there, our feelings are there. But yeah, that's a great way to put it, Mina. I love that. The word neutrality versus objectivity, yeah.
And hopefully we can all continue these conversations beyond just this hour-long check-in. So something to keep thinking over. I do see a question here from Laura. So this question is for Erika. Was the woman standing in front of the display case during the opening of the show to act as a living history depository?
No, so that was actually Miss Diane, and we just took a picture because what I didn't say is that the words that were behind her were actually her words about being a Holyoke girl. And so the reason why I took that picture and why we use that quote is because like Holyoke isn't thought of as a Black space. And so I think that like it was just super important. It's like one of the pictures that I used like for our social media, just to like present her. But what we did do for our closing event was host a panel with a few of the folks who agreed to like answer specific questions from the community. But no, so we didn't do like a living history repository. We didn't have that, no.
Thanks, Erika. I also see I missed a question earlier from Martha, and I believe it's related to everyday Boston, but the question is this limited to Boston? And Martha, if I have that wrong, please clarify in the chat. You're muted.
Maybe you got my head shake. No, it's not.
Okay,
So
great.
if you're interested, I'd love to chat.
All right, another question from Amy. Is there an intended audience for the documentary, funders, residents of Lynn, artists, or is it purely a documentation / uncovering and the audience is open-ended?
I'd say the audience is open-ended. It's very much geared towards, I'd say, like Lynn people. It's about Lynn people, but I really would love to see this in educational settings. I think that the conversation is not happening. It's not happening soon enough. It's not happening quick enough. And public arts is getting bigger and bigger. So we definitely want to do like an outdoor screening at the Lynn Museum. And yeah, we're trying to get it out there for sure.
Another question from Keita. If you could pick one thing, what would most help your projects move forward? And this is to everyone.
We need money. I agree with Alison. I think money is a really big thing for us, at least in Holyoke. Like for the Mass Humanities grant, we were like really limited to only to interviewing 10 people. And so although there were like more people that I interviewed and I'm consistently having conversations with folks, like the reality is like I'm a student and a parent, right? And so I have to work. And so while I want to be able to do this work full time, right, and kind of like move it around the state, and I'm probably going to connect with you, Cara and Armand. But I think that like there are so many stories that folks want to tell and so many opportunities, but because of funding, it's really limited in certain ways. And also to the point about funding, like there are a lot of funders who like I was able to be the person, like the scholar for this project, but because I have a degree. And so one of the things that I consistently talk about is that like the folks in the community are the historians, right? Like they're the experts on their history. And I think that like once funders start to open up and stop being exclusive and exclusionary in their funding processes and their the way that they give money, I think that that would enable people in the community to kind of take up, like, here's a training, right? Like, I got trained, let me train you, right? And then you go out into the community and you do this work. But we need money in order for folks to be like, I'm gonna leave my job and I'm gonna do this full time because it's super important, right? And it's work that needs to be done. But people don't just have like disposable income or disposable time, you know, so money.
Yeah, I would agree, money for sure. But also, Erika, I'm so glad that you raised that point about expertise and who's considered an expert. I think run up into that all the time, find it unbelievably frustrating. Anyway, but I also think one of the things that we struggle with a bit is this idea of how do you measure impact when we're talking about stories, and how do you measure the worth of a connection if it doesn't bear fruit immediately, you know, but you plant a seed and down the line, somebody is interacting with somebody that they might have sort of had a stereotype that just jumped into their head, you know, but maybe they heard the story or they met somebody who, you know, and I'm not being articulate, but I think the point is that these kinds of connections sometimes bear fruit weeks, months, years down the line, and they are critical, in my opinion. And so making the case to funders for why this work matters in ways that you can't necessarily measure is tough. And I wish that we could see a little bit of a shift in terms of that in the funder world.
And how about from Rajaiah, Edwin, and Ali in response to the "what do you need" question? Or what is the one thing that would be very helpful?
Is that for, yeah, I would just second on funding, especially for outside of the documentary project. Obviously that requires a lot of funding just to be able to continuously do this and find time to do it. But in terms of also the Lynn HipHop Wall of Fame is we have a bunch of other projects that helps promote that project. For example, we have a exhibit that we want to do at the Lynn Museum celebrating Lynn hip hop and teaching people about the culture of Lynn hip hop. And that requires also a little bit of funding to help kind of promote the whole overall project. So there's definitely things that we're trying to build along with the mural to try to really kind of get the community, the hip hop community, and the musicians within that community a little bit more recognition within the people that live in the communities themselves. So yeah, I guess the short end is having funding will allow that to happen more.
Great, thanks. And we are over time by a couple of minutes. There's one question that, let's see, one more question, and then we'll close out. So Claudia asked for Edwin and Ali, have you considered reaching out to the city as they embark their comprehensive plan, Vision Lynn? I know.
I've taken
Sorry.
the survey for Vision for Lynn. I don't know what the results of that survey have been, but I'm in touch with, I know some folks who are attached to that. But I am very new. I wrote one grant to the local cultural council here, still waiting to hear back. And so any resources or ideas here are so welcome.
Great. All right, well, thank you so much to our guest speakers. Giving you a little round of applause. Yeah, thank you for taking the time and for taking the time to share with us all. And to everyone else, I hope you continue enjoying the year that is 2022 as we get through the winter. And I hope you all stay safe and well. And yeah, let's continue the conversation, and we'll keep in touch as we share notes and a link to the recording and hopefully other things in the future. Thank you, everyone.